push this similarity business. People have tried to push it to its limits. What happens with Mormons, or when you have many marriages, many wives? This fellow has 9 wives. They all look the same. They all look like sisters. In fact, a couple of them are sisters. You might think in this, you want to ginger up your family life, but no. The reason is, if you're all the same and all like sisters, you get along better. And if you do have a falling out, then it's much easier to mend your ways and get it back together again. Next one, cross-race marriages. There are more and more cross-race marriages. They've been studied. In Hawaii, there are 1,000 cross-race marriages measured in the Hawaii Family Study. And interestingly enough, what you find is that those people who've married a cross-race make up, so to speak, for the dissimilarity in their genes by being even more similar in things like personality, social attitudes, and general intelligence. Go to the next one. Homosexual gay couples. More and more marriages, but there are studies being done now of assortative mating in gays. What do you find? Similarity again. Next one. Okay, same-sex friends. Similarity rules. I mean, on university campuses, as Jared Taylor's always saying, you know, with all this diversity, people make friends and sit together with people of their own background. Next one. Next one. Next one. Oh. This is nearly 20 years ago now. I did a study, which I'll mention again, on best friends. And we brought best friends, we put ads in the newspapers. They had to be non-homosexual best friends, knew each other for over 2 years. Come into the university and be paid, and we drew blood from them, we took blood samples, we measured all their minute physical characteristics, measured their personality, measured their social attitudes. And my research assistant, who initially gathered them, put them into a room, separated the best friends so that they couldn't look at each other's answers and falsely find more similarity than there actually was. And then I would come in a little bit later and check out how it was all going. When I would look into the room, I was almost always able to pair up who these friends were. And one of the small regrets of my research life anyway is that I didn't take a camera with me and take photographs of them, because you would find that bikers went with bikers, weightlifters went with weightlifters, preppy people went with preppy people. We can go to the next slide. So whatever the mechanisms were, best friends tend to be, they look alike. Next. Well, how far really? This paper appeared about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, in Psychological Science. It was a top journal, and it looked at, do you look like your dog? Well, next slide. This is my research assistant. This is my research assistant, and she and I did a big twin study, which I'm going to tell you about very shortly. And she said, no, don't poo-poo this. This is a really important study. Look, this is Oakley, my little Shih Tzu, and I think there's a similarity. And I said, well, yes, I can see what you mean. He's a very handsome dog, very pretty. I didn't know quite what to say because I didn't want to insult her by saying, yes, you look like a dog. So Trudy recognized that I had a sort of little diffidence about this. So she went on the internet and said, look, it's very well known that people look like their dogs. In fact, there are even do you look like your dog contests. You have the next one? And this was... Next one. Next one. Trudy, hold on. I said, well, I can't show that one because I'm not sure there's much of a resemblance there. She said, no, look, you know. So look, that the nice broad forehead there, the colouring is sort of there, large, sort of luminous, friendly eyes. But it sort of left me with the feeling of, now, is Nick Griffin a lab or is he a Rottweiler? Well, I'll ask him afterwards. Anyway, next one. Why? This is Charles Darwin. Why on earth should there be a tendency for like to go with like? So strongly that when you buy a thoroughbred dog, in fact, you find one that even looks a bit like you. What is that genetic tendency that leads you down these avenues? And Charles Darwin had his theory of evolution, and one of the biggest anomalies in his theory was altruism. Compassion, as Jared was talking about earlier, in fact, goes far down, well, not compassion, but altruistic behavior goes far down the evolutionary scale. Ants are one of the most altruistic species that there is. If an anthill falls in, the soldier ants come out and they defend it. The worker ants come out after them. They repair it. And they repair it so that they are in fact left outside along with the soldier ants, who are then overwhelmed eventually by the enemy soldier ants. So these individual ants have sacrificed their individual lives for the good of the hive. And Charles Darwin was saying, well, you know, my theory really is about survival of the fittest individual. So you might think that the most selfish individual with the sharpest elbows, who elbowed everybody else out of the way, was the person whose genes were going to get replicated. How does altruism, caring for others, get selected? And so there were various theories of the good of the species and so on that were mounted, never very satisfactorily answered. And Charles Darwin recognized this as what we call in science an anomaly, or a little paradox, a problem for the theory. You accept the theory because it explains so much, but this little paradox remains, niggling away for maybe decades. So altruism isn't just there in ants, it's there in many, many species. Ground squirrels and chimpanzees willingly sacrifice birds themselves for other birds. How does this get selected by evolution? Next slide. Well, the answer is sociobiology. This is William Hamilton in 1964 put out a genetical mathematical model to explain it. And he did it in such a precise way that everybody finally said, yes, William Hamilton solved Darwin's paradox. And he launched the new discipline of sociobiology. His argument was very simple, obvious really when you think about it, that if the altruist sacrifices his own life for copies of his own genes in others, such as his offspring or his siblings' offspring, then those same altruistic genes will get replicated. So this is a selfish gene perspective. Altruism is selfish. It's in the service of replicating genes. And that's all there is in life as far as an evolutionary biologist is concerned, is genes replicating themselves over and over. Human beings, all animals, all cultures are just vehicles for the replication of genes into the next generation. Next. And that launched sociobiology. In 1975, evolutionary thinking suddenly came back not only into biology, but into all the behavioral sciences. And this is the cover of E.O. Wilson's book, famous professor at Harvard University. The next one. This is a 1976 book by Richard Dawkins, equally famous professor at Oxford University. And he brilliantly titled his book, The Selfish Gene, because that captured the essence of this general argument. Now, the selfish gene was immediately picked up by right-wing groups and left-wing Marxists and so on who wanted to argue that this was all, everything was due to culture, were suddenly on the defensive. And so they were denouncing this as racist and fascist theories. And if you go to the next slide, this is a paper